Sometime today, or maybe tomorrow, most, if not all of us, will gather around tables with people we care about, hopefully, to break bread. For many of us, this may be the first time in a long time that we have done this. It being Thanksgiving and all, before digging in, someone might even suggest that someone should say a blessing over the meal. Now, while I suspect this moment triggers panic in the hearts of the more prayer-averse amongst us, my guess is that we're all just a little bit relieved when someone, anyone else really, agrees to take up this most solemn duty of Thanksgiving. As you might imagine, being asked to say grace on short notice and in all sorts of settings is something of a job hazard in my line of work. Along with the standard wedding rehearsal dinners and 50th wedding anniversary celebrations, I've also been called on to offer a blessing before a football game and to say grace with a gathering of Muslims and Jews who were at the time refusing to speak to one another. And perhaps like many of you, I have been nudged into praying at family holiday meals, though I should tell you that those invitations have tapered off across the years, no doubt a subtle commentary on my theology. This reminds me of an old episode of The Simpsons when Bart, the ever so candid son, was asked to say grace. With head bowed, he prayed with his usual air of sarcasm. "Dear God, we paid for all this food ourselves, so thanks for nothing." It's an honest enough prayer given our modern separation from the sources of so much of what we eat and the vast resources and labor hidden behind most every item that fills our shopping carts. Yet it would be a mistake, like Bart's, to take the ability to buy anything we might want in this world to somehow be a sign of self-reliance. If anything, our very need to pay for something, for anything, points instead to the interdependence that is increasingly at the heart of life on this complicated and deeply connected planet of ours. A point brought home to us in distressing detail in recent years marked by pandemic, war, and the damaging effects of climate change. The impact these forces have had on our economy of late, and the reminder that we are served by supply chains that stretch around the planet into places we don't even know, should remind us all that what touches the life of one of us eventually affects us all. But I'm not here today to speak about the global economy, but instead an economy of gratitude. 700 years ago, Meister Eckhart said that if the only prayer we ever learn to say is thank you, it will be enough. I think he was on to something there, something we arguably need as much or more in our time than he in his. For to have thank you on our lips is the surest sign I know that we recognize that our lives are lived in relationship, marvelously and sometimes frustratingly entangled with others, but always in relationship. Yet it is one of life's truths that we so easily forget, a truth so readily sacrificed on the altar of independence, whenever we see ourselves somehow set apart from the gifts and the obligations of community, of meaningful connection. Though the topic warrants a full sermon on its own, in passing, I would like to say that this point gets at the heart of my own notion of sin, that living as we do in a delicate and interconnected web with all of life, that to break faith with those relationships for one's own gain is to have a sinful disregard for the sacred trust that binds us together with all of life. There's a story inspired by a passage in Alice Walker's book, Sent by Earth, that describes a very unusual tribe in South Africa called the Babemba. They were unusual because of the way they handled problems in their community. The story goes of a grouchy man who moved to the village. He didn't really fit in very well because he was always in a bad mood. He didn't really take good care of himself, and he didn't really even seem to like himself. He mostly kept to himself, except when he sold the baskets of fruit that he had gathered up from the forest. Despite his grouchy demeanor, some people in the village had noticed what a beautiful voice he had, when he called out to the villagers when he was in the market. Others noticed what great care he took in preparing the fruit, and still others noticed how he was always generous to the children. But one day, one of the villagers' cow went missing. Everyone was puzzled. They couldn't imagine how the cow could have gotten away without someone's help. They feared that someone maybe had stolen the cow, but rarely had anyone stolen anything in this village, so they were more confused. The villagers began looking everywhere for the cow and eventually found it far away, tied up next to the grouchy man's hut. Now, it was the tradition of this village for everyone to surround a person that had broken the law. So when the man returned from picking fruit, all of the villagers surrounded him in a very large circle. This made him very nervous. He did not know what they were going to do to him. While he knew he should not have stolen the cow, he was desperate for some milk. And he had reached a point of not caring about what might happen to him anymore, and he thought no one else cared either. Just as he was bracing for the worst from the villagers, though, they all began to say very nice things to him. They bombarded him with compliments. They were yelling out things like, "We love the way that you prepare your fruit, and we're grateful to you for giving fruit to our children, and thank you for your beautiful voice when you call out to us." They yelled out all of the things they liked about him, all the things that he was good at, all of the wonderful things that they had seen him do. Now, this was not at all what he was expecting. And in that moment, his anger and hatred for himself began to melt away, and his heart began to open to the kindness of these people. But they continued to bombard him. The villagers saw his face change. He eventually began to cry. Children ran to hug him, and all the villagers welcomed him back into the tribe. The man eventually sang and danced with all the villagers long into the night. Never had he felt so good about himself. Never had he felt that he had truly come to a place of belonging. He then knew he had people who cared about him because, rather than punishing him, they had reminded him of his very best self. And from that day forward, the grouchy man was grouchy no more. He spent the rest of his life trying to be the best person he could be, all because the people around him believed that he could be better than he had been. This story demonstrates not only an amazing act of forgiveness, but the transforming power of gratitude. Describing this tradition, Alice Walker, the author, explains, "It is said that in the Babema tribe in South Africa, when a person acts irresponsibly or unjustly, he is placed in the center of the village, alone and unfettered. All work ceases, and every person in the village gathers in that large circle around the accused individual. And then each person in the tribe speaks to the accused, one at a time, about all the good things the person in the center of the circle has done in their lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail and accuracy is recounted. All their positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and kindnesses are recited carefully and at length. This tribal ceremony often lasts for several days. At the end, when the tribal ceremony is broken, a joyous celebration takes place, and the person is symbolically and literally welcomed back into the tribe." What moves me about this story is that gratitude serves as the way back into relationship, into community, and into the fullness of life. My heart was moved by the example of a community that, damaged by this one man's selfish act, could find healing by choosing to see him as more than his mistakes, a person who had simply forgotten his inherent worth and dignity and lost sight of his best self. If such words of gratitude, such words of deep appreciation could restore and recall a grouchy man back to himself, what about us? We have often shared in this congregation the words of George Odell, words that affirm that we do indeed need one another. Every line of that poem speaks to the gifts of love we give to each other in community, but some of the most moving are these. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. What if we, like the Babemba people, were to adopt gratitude as our way to make these words real? Just what effect might true Thanksgiving have on our lives, not just on a special day, but every day? A wealth of research into gratitude has brought forth a number of compelling findings. Studies have shown that gratitude is good for us. Grateful people report higher levels of positive emotions, life satisfaction, vitality, and optimism, and lower levels of depression and stress. People with a strong disposition toward gratitude have the capacity to be empathic and to take the perspective of others. They are rated as more generous and more helpful by people in their social networks. Grateful people are more likely to acknowledge a belief in the interconnectedness of life and a commitment to and responsibility to others. And I want to make sure you hear this point. Those who regularly attend religious services and engage in religious activities are likely to be more grateful. I believe this is especially true for us as Unitarians. My colleague Galen Gingrich, the minister of All Souls Unitarian in Manhattan, sees gratitude as our defining practice. He says that for Jews, the defining discipline is obedience. To be a faithful Jew is to obey the commands of God. For Christians, the defining discipline is love. To be a faithful Christian is to love God and your neighbor as yourself. For Muslims, the defining discipline is submission. To be a faithful Muslim is to submit to the will of Allah. And what of us? What should be our defining religious discipline? While obedience, love, and even submission each play a vital role in the life of faith, his conviction is that our defining discipline should be one of gratitude. In the same way that Judaism is defined by obedience, Christianity by love, and Islam by submission, Galen Gingrich believes that Unitarian Universalism should be defined by gratitude. As he explains it, there are two dimensions that recommend gratitude as a compelling defining religious practice for us. One, he says, has to do with a discipline of gratitude, and the other has to do with an ethic of gratitude. His discipline of gratitude reminds us how utterly dependent we are on the people and the world around us for everything that matters. From this, he says, flows an ethic of gratitude that obligates us to create a future that justifies an increasing sense of gratitude for the human family as a whole. The ethic of gratitude demands that we nurture the world that nurtures us in return. The two forms of gratitude that it takes in our lives, as a discipline and as an ethic, are natural outcomes of what he calls the two elements of religious experience, awe and obligation. It is, he says, the experience of awe and wonder that leads to the discipline of gratitude, and the experience of obligation and responsibility that leads to an ethic of gratitude. And returning to the Babemba people of South Africa, we can see both this discipline and this ethic in action. The discipline of gratitude, the practice of recognizing the depths of our interdependence, is evident in the careful attention that the tribe had paid to the grouchy man's best attributes long before that cow ever went missing. The tribe had already been cultivating a culture of deep appreciation by bothering to routinely notice those splendid moments that point to another's best self. The ethic of gratitude can, of course, be seen in the way that the tribe addressed a selfish act by one of its own. There were so many other ways to respond to his crime, and the man clearly feared the worst when he was surrounded by his tribe. But rather than hurl insults or stones, they bombarded him with blessings of gratitude and appreciation. With their words, they gave back to him the dignity that he had squandered through stealing. No wonder he wept. No wonder they danced. It was a moment of grace, a moment that restored the fabric of a community by honoring the sacred bonds that bound their lives together. Friends, should you be called upon to say grace this Thanksgiving, may you take up the challenge with conviction. May you open your hearts and minds to the wonder of just being alive. May you be filled with gratitude for those who've called you to your highest self. And when you manage to catch your breath, may you simply begin with the words, "Thank you."